All right, the first question that came from our team here is this. What do you look for when you come into a classroom? What do you look for when you come into a record? Let me get the recording going.
Recording in progress.
We look for a teacher.
All right, anyone can respond.
Well, I guess I'll start. When I go into a classroom, I look for engagement by the students and the teacher. I look for that connection to see that the teacher has that relationship with the students. A cleanish, organized classroom.
Don't say everything now.
I know. and good management. Management of the schedule, management of the students, of the behaviors, that you're connecting with the kids. I already said that, but that you're addressing issues as they come up necessarily, and not just ignoring certain behaviors that really should be addressed.
Recording in progress.
Good to know.
Anyone else?
You guys go ahead.
Thank you, Ms.
I agree with everything that she said. I think that's important. I'm kind of looking for who's in charge. A lot of times we look at classroom management as a bunch of rules and techniques and all of that kind of stuff, and that's true to a point. But I think the persona of the teacher really determines and sets the tone for the kids' response and whether they're going to be buying into learning or whether they're the ones running the classroom. And you can just see that in the teacher's persona.
Yeah.
So for the Indiana teachers, we're going to be going through, in our study groups, the new Art and Science of Teaching. And you will, as we read through that book, you'll see exactly what we expect to see in the classroom, pretty much. So that really spells out feedback, context, content, and then it breaks that down. And we want to establish a common language of what we expect in the classroom. So that's why we'll be going through that book in our study groups this year. So you'll get to read through that, and then by the end of that, hopefully we can talk the same language. If you're doing direct instruction and I said, you need to work on your chunking, you'll know what I mean, but right now you're like, what is he talking about? So anyways.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes.
I agree with everything totally, but I guess when I go in, I like to see joy in the classroom. I want to see that the kids love to be there, and that the teacher loves to be there. And so I've been to some classrooms where I don't see joy, and it hurts me. So I think if you have all these things, you're going to see joy, and I like to see that.
Very good.
Great answers. I'll talk about it from a principal's perspective, because that's where I just did 10 years as a principal. I also, every single thing that everybody here said, but I also like to see students owning their environment. So the management is so cohesive that students know exactly what the expectations are, and they are really student leaders in carrying out activities, working independently. They know exactly what they're doing, and it works very cohesively.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so the next question is kind of a couple of questions that go together. How often will I be observed or evaluated? How long will it be? How long will it last? What feedback will I get?
Well, I mean, I can say there's different kinds of evaluations. There's the formal evaluation that will take a little longer. That's probably going to be in your classroom for 40 minutes to an hour. There'll be some information before the meeting. I may ask you to rate yourself or reflect on what you think, how you are in these certain areas. And then afterwards, we'll have a discussion and/or an email, depending on how the visit went. But then informally, you know, I like to just show up unexpected, not to do a in-depth, because you know when you know we're coming, it's the dog and pony show, right? Hopefully you've got your best foot forward. But when we show up and it's unexpected, you know, we just kind of peek in and observe one or two things informally, and normally that's all good. But we're trying to help. We're not there to scare you, or it's sometimes when you're in the middle of doing something, you don't always see where you're at in it, if that makes sense. Sometimes you get blind spots, and we're just trying to help you see the blind spots that might cause an issue later on. That's the only reason. So think of it as a collaborative experience. Think of it as we want to help you.
Our goal is to have one formal evaluation with all of our teachers in at least our conference. We have just over 100 teachers, so we try to do one formal every year. And that's basically kind of like a legal process. We have paperwork that we fill out, you sign it, we go over it with you, it goes in your file. For brand new teachers that have never taught before, we try to do 2 formals. When we have full-time principals in the building, they are responsible to do the evaluations with our assistants if needed. Not this year, but the following year, we're going to be looking at going into the Danielson framework for evaluations, which is much more of a collaborative approach to evaluation, where the teacher takes a lot of the ownership, like you're talking to students. The teacher takes a lot of the ownership in their own growth trajectory. So we're going to be introducing that at Teachers Convention next week, and then looking to adopt the software so that we have more universality across the board, and we can speak a common language when it comes to what we're trying to shoot for with our evaluative process.
I can speak a lot about the Danielson. We used that when I was in Illinois. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, coming from Illinois, that's the framework that we used, and I think it's good because it lets educators or teachers know exactly what good teaching looks like, and what kids should be doing if this is happening. And it's good. You have a pre-observation meeting where you bring exactly what's going to be observed and how you adjusted your plan to meet the needs of all the students, how you differentiated your plan. And you talk about that, all of it, everything, all the materials you're going to use for the lesson, and then the observation happens, and then you have I send a script of what I observed in the classroom, and then we come back for a post-observation meeting, and then you get your formal observation document at the end. So it is very thorough.
Yes, it is.
Okay. The next
Did
question.
anyone, just real quickly, did anyone want to mention, you mentioned a little bit, Peter, about walkthroughs, just those
Yes.
unexpected, or even, I'm going to be in town that day, I may pop into your classroom, what would a walkthrough be like, just to give them an idea of language here, instead of something so formal?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, a walkthrough is real quick, 5 minutes or less. And I'm just, if there's anything as I walk through that just jumps out at me, which may or may not happen, you know what I mean? So, but it's just kind of a very informal.
Right.
And if I do it right, you don't even know I'm doing it.
Unfortunately for my teachers, like I come and I stay for most of the day. So I just show up sometimes, and I just like to help you in the classroom, or just be there if you need something. If you need to go to the bathroom, I'll watch your kids. So I do that a lot. And then before your evaluation, I'll give you a sheet and send you like, what do you want me to look for? You know, what are some kids you want me to watch, or different things like that, so I can be looking for things to observe that you are wanting me to look for, things like that. So
All right, thank you. I think I'm returning to teaching there, Ms. Madsen. Superintendent again. All right, this is my question, right? This is one of mine. What are your expectations in a lesson plan?
And I think that was coming from the mindset of some people are just fresh and they're used to having to write extended lesson plans. So if you come in and say, could I see your lesson plans, what do you hope to see?
So Ellen White says in the book Education that we want to teach students to be independent thinkers and not mere reflectors of other men's thoughts. I've started to apply that to teachers as well. You have to fight in your armor. David couldn't fight Goliath in Saul's armor because it wasn't something he was used to. It wasn't his skill set. And so I'm not coming into your classroom, you know, with an A, B, C, D type of a thing. And if you don't have that in order, then your lesson plan isn't right. I want to see that you obviously have a plan, that you are going to be able to show a measurable outcome. You're going to be able to demonstrate that students have mastered the content you're trying to teach them. But how you accomplish that, as long as it's to the standards and as long as it's you know, in line with our policies, I'm not scripting what I'm expecting you to see. Some teachers have really, really extensive lesson plans, but they can't get up and connect with students. Some teachers have, you know, a basic outline, but they get up and they're just masterful at guiding students to the conclusions that they need. So I'm very careful in not trying to script too heavily how you do your lesson plans. You need to do them, they need to be thorough, but they need to also have that flexibility built in that will allow you to navigate and change as you go as well.
Speak to that.
I would agree with that.
So I do expect my teachers to turn in lesson plans once a week, and it doesn't matter how they turn them in. I mean, I have a teacher that like writes them by hand and then takes a picture on his phone, you know, because everyone does them differently, and whatever works for you. So that's how I ask them. But I do once a week like to see them, because I've had those phone calls from parents like, our teacher's not teaching, you know, we don't know what they're doing, and I can look and say, oh yes, this is what they're doing, and I've already walked through their classroom, and you know, I can see that they're following their long-range plans, they're keeping to what they need to be teaching. And so I don't expect detail, but if you're a detailed person, not that I can read when I walk in, I know what you're teaching. I know that you planned. It's not just like Bible, you know, animated. You've got to give me a little detail so I know that you put some thought, you plan, you're not just picking up a book and what am I doing next, you know, the next thing. Really putting some thought into it. But yes.
All right. So the next question, and understand that one topic we haven't covered this week at all is MAP testing. So that's it's being tossed out, but we haven't addressed it. So maybe somebody who feels like they could address just what, you know, how it works, because one of the questions we had was, why do we have testing 3 times a year instead of 2? And maybe explain the increments and all that, and why do teachers need to, or what do teachers need to do or expect for MAP? Thinking of like rostering, testing, etc.
Oh, that's good.
Well, I think we do it 3 times a year so that we can see the growth, right? You've got a base in the fall, and then you see where they're at in the winter, and then you can see by the spring kind of where the growth has been throughout. And so it's really beneficial during your parent-teacher conferences as well, because you can say here, and what MAP does too is it breaks it down into different more specific topics. So it's not just math, right? It's numbers and operations and geometry, and it kind of really breaks it down, and it can even go farther and deeper than that into specific concepts of, wow, they know this really well, but here you can see, let's focus on this specific area because this is where they are lacking. And in Illinois, we're going to do a training right before MAP testing, a little bit closer to it, so that we're not bombarded right now for something that's not going to happen for another 6 weeks, because by then we're not going to remember how to do it anyway, and that's understandable. So we'll get a little more specific closer to MAP testing time. And then we're also going to do an in-service in October with MAP reports and growth reports and goal setting with MAP as well.
So Map testing and Iowa Basics are completely different philosophical approaches.
Yeah.
Iowa was very achievement-based, so when you're taking a test in the fall, you're seeing if the student has mastered everything they need to master in the grade that they were previously in. And then, of course, we have parent-teacher conferences 3 or 4 months later. And honestly, I don't think our teachers are really utilizing that information to inform instruction, and a lot of times coming upon the information and sitting down with parents much too late in that process. MAP is really, really good because it gives you a snapshot of where the student is, and then it also,
Instantly.
versus being just achievement-based, it's trajectory-based. So it's saying,
Yes.
where is this student headed based upon how they're doing here? And are they going to meet their learning goals by the time they get to this particular point? It'll even tell you if they're looking at being able to do high-stakes testing like SATs and all of that for college. And like you were saying, it drills right down into the very core, minuscule concept that the student is struggling with. I think it's really critically important for you to educate yourselves. We've provided training for our teachers, but at the end of the day, you've got to wrestle with it. You've got to get in there and learn how it works and how it functions and how that can inform your instruction. You also need to really make sure that you are educating parents and students on the philosophical shift that MAP testing is. When students sit down and they take that test, they're going to get 50% of the questions right, and they're going to get 50% of the questions wrong. That's difficult for a child because they're taking the test and like, man, I've got to make sure I get all these questions right, or that's the way academic testing usually functions. You need to ease some of those burdens with the kids and also inform the parents about how that works and what it's trying to measure. So it's a completely philosophical difference, and you've got to do the stewardship of making sure that you utilize the training modules, all of that information, so that you can sit down intelligently and talk to parents about how the student is doing and what you are doing. Because that's really the key.
Right.
You now are going to be held to a higher level of accountability. Are you drilling down and addressing those areas that are showing up as weak on MAP testing?
Right.
It'll tell you exactly what they are, and then translating that into how you instruct that student.
And you can take those scores and you can put them in like Khan Academy and other places and helps to meet their needs and where those holes are. So there are places to help you from there then on too. I would say too, think about when you test what's good for your students, because as I talk to a lot of my teachers, they're like, the kids maybe did really bad on their test. Why did they? Look at when you're testing, there's the adaptability to like pause halfway through, go take them outside.
Right.
Think about their scoring has to do a lot with, do they eat breakfast? I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it when you look at the scores and think about how you test. And with it all online right there, it's easy to make adjustments and to work and individualize or in small groups, so think about those things too.
Along the lines of this, when I had the privilege of teaching principal, when I was a teacher principal in an elementary school, and we did test, that time it was ITBS, Iowa Test of Basic Skills. We hadn't transitioned to Iowa's yet. I give a lot of breaks during the day.
Yeah.
I mean, if it were a 10-minute test or 15-minute, I'd do 2 of them, and we'd go outside. Sometimes you might think, oh, we got to get this done, but you'd be amazed at the benefit of fresh air into the brain, and just really, and the kids' attitudes towards. So something to think about, not just sitting and going one after the other. So think about those breaks. That's unrelated to your question, but that came to mind.
And you have less tests than Iowa, so you have the math and the language and the reading, and like our conference is going to start the science. We didn't do it last year, but because there is a little, I think I went through them this year, and there's like maybe 2 or 3 questions on evolution, very few. So I think it's a safe thing to talk to your kids. So there's very few tests, so you can really say 1 a day and then really give breaks and just do something that makes it so easy to do and not.
Right. They're untimed, so the students don't have that pressure of a timed test. The test will also adjust to the student as they're taking it. So the test self-adjusts to higher level or lower level depending on the answers that the students. Right, and rapid guessing, it'll pause it if they're just guessing all the way through. It pauses it, and you've got to go in and put in a code, and I mean, it's kind of a, right. It's like, okay, maybe, you need a break, exactly.
So they can't just go down and fill all the
They
C
cannot.
bubbles out?
No, they can't draw pictures, there's no pictures being drawn,
We have a question right here.
Speaking of math testing, at my school, 9% of the students are ESL students. Haitian refugees, Marshall Islands, Hispanics.
That's a good
is consideration given to those special considerations? Because obviously, many of the law scores highest.
You as the teacher, you get to go in and you put all those considerations in. If they need to be, there's a place that you do on the online when you log your kids in that you can do all those things that they need for those students.
But in this kind of test, that doesn't really matter so much because you want to know where they're at.
Well, matters to me because you look at that.
Yeah.
So,
So, yeah.
Lisa,
Accommodations.
When, to do those accommodations, do they have to have like an official IEP or a language plan, a 504?
504. Yes,
Okay.
they do.
you should, you never want to be accused of favoritism.
No.
Right, right.
You do someone.
Or a modified action from our system, a map.
Yes,
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
certainly.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that someone was coming from the ITBS test that used to, and I've never worked with the MAP test, but I've seen it and I've watched the kids do it. I monitored them while they were doing it. It makes a difference with the parents. I hear what you're saying about, it's to help us. So if a kid scores low, we can say, oh, we need to adjust this. But you, on the other side of it, you have a parent that's saying, why is my kid scoring so low? They dropped. This was the biggest thing I heard was they scored here, and by the second test, they're down here. What happened? Why is my kid not learning? So the parents are really taking these tests kind of hard. So
Right.
there's I don't know if it's a communication problem or just understanding the difference in the two testing. I don't know.
That's kind of the beauty of it though, because you can show their growth.
Yeah.
Because if you have a first grader or a third grader that tests at first grade, maybe at the beginning of the year they tested at kindergarten,
Yeah.
By the end of the year, they're testing second grade. It seems low, but they've grown a whole maybe year and a half in a half year's time or something. So that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
We didn't have that real tangible evidence like that before. So it's a great piece.
And for a student who dropped, especially if they dropped drastically, I would ask that student, hey, did you really try on this test?
Yeah.
What were you doing on this test? Because a lot of times,
Right.
and they'll be honest, a lot of them will be like, yeah, I didn't, I just put answers in.
Right.
so.
We had that problem at the high school
Day.
level. As soon as
I did, I thought so.
I just want to get this done, and they just put whatever.
Right.
Okay,
And
we have
he did better on the second, he did guess and it got better, and I'm like, then don't do that again. You know how you really do.
I see
We got a
quite a
question
number of
here.
hands here that one of our superintendents, so 1, 2, 3, go ahead.
So, because I used to be one of those students, it's not that I couldn't do it, but if I know I have to do 50 questions, I'm just skipping through everything. But so then what do we do to kind of help the students focus? So what do? Do we intentionally, I know it's self-paced, but do we also set a pace ourselves, like, okay, it's gonna be 3 days of MAP testing, so these 3 days, we're not doing anything but testing and maybe PE and art, like, how do we do that?
It won't
Like-
take you 3 days, 3 straight days, because it's 4 tests. If you
15 minutes to
if you
an
do the
hour.
science, it's 4 tests, otherwise there's only 3. And yeah, about an hour apiece really is what they take on average. And so the MAP tests are done at certain times during the year, so I think it's 4 weeks in, and then 20 weeks in, and then 32 weeks in, and so that should be like on your calendar. So your conference will tell you when those are happening. So the whole conference does that at the same time.
But how do we encourage them in the test to like
Do their
it
best.
and not-
Money.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, money, ice cream, no. You can you can set a growth goal, say, look, as a class, if
Yeah.
we have whatever the goal is you set for
Right.
them, if we get that as a class, we're gonna have ice cream.
Okay.
And there's pieces within the MAP growth that allow for student goal setting. So after the test, you do one-on-one with that student and you set the next goal. And you do that motivation that way with them as
We have
well.
to move on from this topic, but this is a very interesting
It's probably
topic.
a really
And we
needed
have a lot of,
discussion.
Right.
but we've got a couple
Well,
of
like
hands.
just the 3 facilitators in the back, I know that, I'm just gonna pick on Lisa for a second and then I'll let you two talk, but Lisa did a wonderful job of like making test weeks a big deal. Like it was special and they had prayer together and they, tell them some of the other things you did, Lisa, and you guys share yours too. This is what you really need to hear.
when it comes for test week, I have in the past, the staff has like decorated the hallway. We've had kids create motivational posters. You can go to Pinterest and you can find like little gift tags, and we will attach it to goldfish. And so we actually give our kids snacks during the test.
Yeah.
And so like one with goldfish is like, you're officially done with the test. Or we've had parents send in notes. Like, we're going to be testing next week, and you send in notes. Kids have put scriptures up on the wall. We make it a big deal. Teachers have worn, you know, t-shirts or sweatshirts or things to kind of motivate kids in the past as well. We try to make it a big deal and then really celebrate the accomplishments with them. And with the MAP test having almost instantaneous results, that's better for the kids. They can really see. And we make a big, I don't care if it's 2 points. You grew by 2 points. That's great. You know, and if they declined, like Peter had said, you don't know what, the kids are honest. I had one, I was really tired. That's very, very obvious. You need to let us know that you're really tired. And I do only test for 20 minutes. And I tell the kids, we're going to pause. Finish your problem, and I hit pause on everybody's stuff. We jump up and down and, you know, run around the room or run down the hallway, and then come back and sit down and finish.
Thank you, Julie.
One thing that I want to be, as teachers in the classroom doing MAP testing, we heard the training that said that it would be about an hour. But because it's untimed, I have had kids that easily took 2 hours, some on up to 3 hours. And so, especially in some of the, in my classroom, I didn't really have a great place to put them. I mean, finally after lunch, I'd stick them in the office. Well, then they quit work, then they just rush through and trying to get back. And so, in the classroom, it may take well over an hour. A lot of them will be done in an hour, but there will be ones that may go a lot longer.
Thank you, Julie. Emily?
I love what you guys said. I love those ideas. We do some things that are similar to you, Lisa. We've had a special breakfast before. I let the kids chew gum that week when we're taking the test. Because I'm in such a small school, I let them move their desks where they want for the week in their test. As long as they're not like right next to somebody. But because they're on the computer, it's a little different than Iowa anyway. So there's some unique and special things. And then the other thing is feedback, because of that instant feedback with the test, or just giving them feedback while they're taking the test, like remember, you don't have to finish in a certain amount of time, take as long as you need, but let's keep going, and just, you know, encouragement. But yeah, it's true. I had one young man, this is the longest test taker I've ever had, my first year of doing math. He was so smart at math, but he did it in his own unconventional way. And it took him forever. But because it was untimed, I was able to see that he was like in the blue, you know, which is like the highest percentile for math. And his parents were able to see that too. And I told him, guys, this took him pretty much the whole day of school. It was literally the whole morning, took a lunch break, whole afternoon. We take a lot of breaks too. They like that too. More breaks than normal. And you can pause the test, and you can also, I don't know if the right word is suspend, but anyways, but yeah, you can even pause it and then come back the next day as long as it's during that window. So I've done that with other students too, so I love math testing.
Thank you. I think we had your hand up and then
Up here in front,
and
for quite some time.
oh, your
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Okay, I just had a question. In that MAP testing, is there within the program, either or out of the program, a hard copy or a practice copy that the kids could practice before they do the test itself?
There's
Because
practice tests.
there are practice tests. So then when that day comes, they already
Right.
know more or less what's coming on the test?
Right.
Yes?
Yeah, online.
And you probably want them to practice online because this is a little different mindset for some kids. Get used to that. Who was next, Ruth?
I was just gonna say positive campaign, like 1 week before, involve the parents with us, tell the parents maybe during these test days or just monitor your kids, no video games or anything like that, and eat a healthy breakfast, do not sleep and all that. So that the parents are involved, they know that it's gonna happen. And when things go wrong, many parents will know, oh, I need to track of my kid that night or something, and we'll avoid a lot of parents complaining.
Sure. Thank you.
One quick thing, all what they said, but it was really important, some kids don't eat breakfast, so I would always bring breakfast that whole week or whatever, and make sure they had good breakfast. Either I did or asked home in school, a good breakfast to make sure they're eating. And last year I went to a classroom and the teacher asked me to test her kids. And so there's a lot of kids that I knew rushed, so I had to turn all their desks to the outside so they couldn't see each other, because some kids always rush and get done. And then I said, put a book and get things on your desk ready so when you're done. So I said, you can't get out of your seats, you have to stay there, and you've got to be really quiet. So the kids took the test, those who were done quietly, you wouldn't even know they were done, and then they read their books and were quiet. And everyone was, you know, they weren't looking like, oh no, they're done, and I'm so embarrassed because I'm still going. So they needed that, you know, reassurance or something else. So make sure they have something to do, they're not up and walking around and talking and stuff like that.
And I think someone mentioned the other day too, don't do science on the science test day, don't do math on the math test day, you know, give them a break.
Yeah, they need breaks.
Sister Garnett, you had
I think what I was going to say is totally been said. But one thing I would add is, you know, it's very, you have to walk that fine line of not stressing kids out with the test, because some kids, you know, they really enjoy the challenge. I'm gonna score 230 or 250. I'm gonna be up there. But then other kids really, they can just freak out over the test, and you know, because you get your score right away, and they're watching you to see what that score was, and you know, it just become a point of stress. And you know, I've had to just say, let's come back to the test tomorrow, and let a kid just go home and, you know, just get some rest and have fun tonight and come back and we'll get back to the test. So that's the beauty of NWEA. You know your kids, you know who's stressing out about it, you know who's sleeping through it, you know who's trying to speed through it. It has thought of all those things, so you can pause it, or to kick the kid out and say, you know, you're just trying to get through it. It's taking care of all of those things. So in my fervor, because I was one of those teachers, and then I was a principal who was just rallying. We had assemblies and pom-poms and everything. It's testing time, isn't it great? You know, and I was one of those, but you know, you have to walk that fine line where you're not stressing kids out. Where they think that, oh man, if I don't do well on this, I'm just going to be a failure.
Thank you for that. One last comment on testing.
Yeah, I was getting the idea, especially listening from back here, that you can, maybe it's a different mindset and attitude towards this testing. Am I wrong in this, that this kind of testing that we're talking about is, it's for us and we can like discuss it with the kids? We can say, okay, we're gonna do this, and then talk with the kids? Or is this like, see, I remember the old ways. Do you have to meet with the parent, talk to them about it? And the kids never knew. I mean, unless the parent discussed it with them. We never discussed ITBS tests with the kids. And so I'm getting that this test is a different kind of test, that is something I can sit down with a kid with and say, okay, this is what you scored, so we're gonna work on this, and we're gonna get some extra time, and we're gonna...
Right, it has a whole goal-setting component where you sit with each student and go over what their baseline information was, and you go over what their goals are for benchmarking, like it was fall, winter, and spring, really. And you go over what you know the system has determined. You scored here, you answered this many questions, these certain group of questions this way, which might be a little deficient in something else in math. And so these are the programs that the lessons. NWEA, I heard Khan Academy will automatically develop a plan, a lesson.
Yes.
But within NWEA, if you really search all of the reports in NWEA, it actually does that as well. It doesn't, you don't have lessons that you can go immediately to, but it will show you exactly, this kid needs something in, you know, whatever.
Divisibility rule.
Right, right. And so you can sit down with your students at the beginning, right after baseline testing, and tell them this is the plan, this is what we need to do to get you to reach your goal, your winter goal. And then, of course, they have a spring goal as well.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just going to share with you what the other questions are. How do we get logins for RenWeb or FACS or Jupyter?
Yes.
That would be work with your conference office of education. They will help you with that. You have to be employed, then you get an email address and it's dashboard, you will put on dashboard and then the rest is history.
Yeah.
All right, so work with your office of education, your superintendents and their administrative assistants on that. Here's a beautiful question, superintendents. Can we start school a week later? That was a question.
Can Christmas be 1 week long?
Yes, as long as we can start school, we can do it.
And we'll just ask the other questions. We may not be able to have time to dig into it, but Cole, you can take the last.
Oh, so this one is actually a really important question. What do you provide in the way of mentors or mentoring? Can you provide a mentor for a new teacher?
We have a mentee-mentor program, and at Teachers Convention, all the new teachers have a lunch meeting with that mentor teacher, and we provide a trip to this mentor's school to observe them for a day, and a trip for that mentor to come and visit the school that the new teacher's in as well. So we want to strengthen that program. We talked a little bit about how we can do that, but yeah, we try to assign new teachers with a teacher in the conference. It's kind of in a similar vein. So that's one of the things that we do.
Thank you.
Illinois has that as well.
We're doing that better this year. More like that.
So we have study groups, and you'll be in a study group with a group of teachers who are teaching similar to what you're teaching. And you'll meet once a month and go through a book and then have shop talk. And that has really formed a lot of natural mentoring.
Right.
Last year it really did. So.
All right. Well, let's give a hand to